Chris, thanks for coming on to the show. You and I got in touch because we both know Sila Reyes, who was a previous guest on LLAG Radio. And like Sila, you are also a multi-talented artist who can rap, who can playwright, and screenwrite. How did these different elements come together into your life? How did they develop? And when did you decide to bring them all together into one?
It's funny, because I've kind of been doing all three at the same time. Like when I was a kid, and by kid, I mean like middle school, early high school. I'm from Tampa, Florida. And when I was growing up there, I was like touring as a rapper from like a super, super young age. It was like freshman year of, high school. And when I was on tour, all the time between, it's lonely, it's rap. So it's like you and a DJ or whatever. I had all this time on my hands, and I was in all these different pockets of the American South and the West and the Midwest and all this, seeing all the shit that I hadn't like, that is definitely kind of opened my eyes to like the cracks in America. And there was stuff there that I had to write about, you know what I mean? And at the time I was also, just starting to like understand what theater was and what it was capable of. And the easy thing I realized was that, and the powerful thing I realized was that it was, if you write a play and it's good, people have to come over to your crib. You know what I mean? And like, it's suddenly you're not alone, you know? And so it became this cycle of like, I would go on tour, write a play, come home, do the play, or do something with the play. And then it was like kind of reacclimating myself to community and kind of telling the stories that I had seen, in my travels, so to speak. And so then I thought I was just going to keep touring and not go to college. My parents were like, please go to college. They're like, please go to college. And it's funny because a lot of my friends, they, who are writers or actors, they always say that, oh, their parents didn't support them being a writer or an actor. But it's like, yo, if you want them to support you being a writer or an actor, tell them you want to be a musician. Then they'll beg you to go to Juilliard. You know what I mean? So, so I ended up going to NYU, which is where I met Sila in the dramatic writing program, just because it was the only place I knew that I had read about that had a writing program specifically for dramatic narrative. And that's what I wanted to pursue. And while I was there, I kept touring and, kept doing the thing. And then after I got out, I went to an acting program for 2 years. And then I had the first play that I think was any good, started to kind of circulate and like actually bring something back into my life. And I won a bunch of stuff. And then a mentor of mine at the Ojai Playwrights Conference, this woman, Sasha Emerson, she was like, you should apply to Yale. And I was like, ugh, just like didn't want to. I just got into the emerging writers group at the Public Theater. And like, if you're a playwright in New York, that's the cool kids club. You know what I mean? That's where you want to be. And I was living in Queens and I was happy. I was living near my parents and like, I didn't want to go to grad school. But then Sasha was like, you just apply and see what happens. And then I got in at Yale. And then I realized that it would have been stupid not to go because they pay for your life for 3 years,
Yeah.
And it also, paid for time for me to make music as well as, write plays and write movies. So it's always kind of, it doesn't never feel like juggling as much as it feels like, one informing the other. And when one aspect of it, you know what I mean? Like when playwriting becomes, too much and I want to retreat into the self, then I can always make music, and vice versa.
Okay. So is it like your creativity, I guess in sort of a weird analogy, it's like it's an assembly line and it goes through like one phase might be playwriting and then it goes through this another phase, and it's not as if one is overpowering the other, they're all just sort of working in sync.
Yes, creatively. I think that career-wise, one totally overpowers the other.
Yeah.
Because being at Yale, I couldn't tour for 3 years.
Yeah.
I made a bunch of records, but I only put out one, and I wasn't really like, I didn't, now the model has changed so much, and now you can get, literally release a song on TikTok or whatever. There's so many different ways you can put out music. I, in a way, was like an old fogey because I still thought you had to like put out an album, tour for 3 weeks, and like So
Uh-huh,
because
uh-huh.
maybe I could have put out more music while I was at Yale, but I hadn't been in the music industry kind of changed under me while I was like in academia, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to resent academia because it stopped me from doing the thing I thought I really wanted to do. But my parents, they're from Columbia. Like they were the first people in their family to go to college and shit. So like they would have been really offended if I hadn't gone to college. And then I ended up going to all this school,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it was a thing where like I actually now I'm grateful for like all the school that I've been able to go to and all the opportunities and the doors that it's opened.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of can't imagine what it would have been like to not have all that institutional credibility.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because it really does open a lot of doors.
Oh
And
yeah.
actually, the doors that it's opened at one point in entertainment, it's just all entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So people start to know everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
And like doors that have opened for music have actually a lot of times come from people respecting me as a narrative writer. Which is that's the Donald Glover secret, right? Because he wasn't like, the idols that I used to have, were these musicians who had to tour 300 days out of the year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Donald Glover didn't do that. He got a job on Community, took that money, made records, and then like made a lateral move inside of what we now think of as like the entertainment industry as a whole. You know what I mean? So I just kind of had to go, okay, I think that's closer to the path that I want to take, and now I'm sort of reacclimating to the music industry and like what it is,
Mm-hmm.
because it's changed so much, and my ideas that I don't know, the lessons that I learned, so to speak, were from a totally different generation.
And you actually spoke. You're speaking at a really important point about how, like one of my favorite things about talking to different artists from different backgrounds is learning how they all manage to sustain their careers, because there really isn't a playbook for how to be a professional artist, a paid artist. And now I don't really know as much about the music industry, but I know that there have been so many changes, and the relationship between artist and manager and label, a lot of that has dramatically changed. And you're sort of talking about how, the traditional models of how to succeed and how to be able to grow your platform and grow your audience is completely different now. What would you say it's like for independent musicians or playwrights nowadays? Is it advisable to like are there some of those old models that or those old rules that still stand true, or is it now just like, hey, everyone is doing something totally different, it's now all up in the air?
Oh man, that's quite a question. I mean, look, the main difference between playwriting and music is speed.
Yeah.
You could have a song go viral tomorrow and suddenly you have A&Rs from Atlantic Records calling you. You could
Jeez.
have the best play in the world. You could have written 7 guitars or, whatever, and it doesn't it's going to take a year and a half minimum. Like a year and a half is fast for a play.
Wow.
It's more likely going to take 3 years for you to even see the play and then get a review and then whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's, people are up and coming playwrights at like 35, 40,
Yeah.
In music, it's like, I don't know. I think people's careers sometimes tend to be shorter, and that the things tend to skew younger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There are artists now on SoundCloud that are, sometimes I realize, like the other day I found out that Bad Bunny was 26, and I was like, oh shit, like, you
Wow.
know what I mean? Or at least he was 26 when I think like the first records came out, and I think that's a fully fledged artist. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? One of the biggest artists in the world, right? And like there was a point where I was like, maybe my gripe with academia is just that it's stealing my youth. You know what I mean? Like maybe I should start lying about I'm grown, I'm about to be 30. So it's like that. I feel like in the music industry, especially in hip hop, it's like it's youth culture.
Yeah.
So and I have the benefit of being a cis dude. Like if I was a woman, then people would say like, okay, your career, like you were done at 23. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
terms of you're gonna pop off. So it's just I think that's like the primary difference between the models of how stuff gets out. That being said, you know, music, the platforms are readily available in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like self-produce plays, but I've done it. It's so hard,
Mm-hmm.
and for often very little return, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um, so it's just like you kind of do need to most of the time feed into either the nonprofit system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which and now you're dealing with season planning, and that takes like, you know, it takes time, you know, to first get read by every single person in the world and then have them consider you for like 22, 23. And now with Corona, you know, is theater even, does it exist? Like I just sold the Broadway option for a play right before Corona. And
Oh.
now, you know what I mean? I'm like, and I was, dude, it was the biggest thing in my life on some
Yeah.
level. And like, now what does that even mean? You know? Um, and that the thing with plays is that they have to meet their societal moment. That's what, you know, Jeannie O'Hare said. She's like, plays need to meet their societal moment. And I pride myself as being a writer who writes to the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're writing something that's hot in the current climate and you're speaking to that moment, and then the play gets produced 5 years later, it could fall flat. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It has a less, the chance of
The
success is way,
relevance and
exactly. And not that I'm like, you know, I don't write ambulance chasing plays. You know what I mean?
yeah.
I'm writing about the things I've been writing about for my whole career, or whatever, career is maybe a big word, but like
Mm.
the whole time I've been writing, just because that's what's meaningful to me. You know, my dad's an immigration attorney. He's a defense attorney who was also an immigrant. So like when I'm writing immigrant stories, I'm writing shit that I know about, right? You know, people that I know. It happens to be that now, because of Trump and whatever, now it's like, oh, it feels so hot and current. I'm like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
okay, dude, I wrote that play 8 years ago. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like, I don't know. And the market keeps changing and shifting, and you know,
So
even
how do you
TV.
think it's going to, you know, especially with the coronavirus, and especially since, you know, there really is no definite date when everything's going to go ahead and go back to normal. How do you see this playing out for your industries?
With theater, it's wait and see. With TV, like we're in staffing season right now, and Hollywood doesn't give a fuck. They're acting like nothing's on the development side, right?
Mm-hmm.
In production, everything's halted,
Mm-hmm.
but they're still staffing rooms like crazy right now, because the idea is that they want to like stack all these finished scripts so that the second the doors open, we're in
Oh.
production. So it's very possible that in 6 months, the entire country is in a Dust Bowl depression, and I'm like writing on a CBS show. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
whatever, there are people who are going to be working from home, making $4,000 a week,
Mm-hmm.
while other people are starving, and they're making TV or whatever, and TV is not even in production. So it's like, weirdly, it's a good time to be on the development side.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of production, a lot of the kids I went to school with, designers, actors who don't have trust funds. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
what are they going to do? And my friends and I would talk about that all the time. Like, what are you going to do? With music, it's actually maybe a good time to release stuff. Because, if you're bored and at home, like, there's
Mm-hmm.
maybe a more chance you listen to the record, but you can't tour.
Yeah.
There are like really fancy artists that I really look up to who now are posting their Patreon info on Twitter. And I'm like,
Wow. It's like,
damn, dude.
everything's changed.
Like, I thought you were eating, you know what I mean? And now it's like, Patreon, bro, that sucks. And that means, like, if you're trying to start a career, I don't know.